BL0SSOMVX says early.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang Greenland's coming, let's go.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grump says Blossom in the house.
Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grump says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Benjamin is in the house.
BL0SMVXE says early.
Gaga Grump says Blossom in the house.
Welcome gremlins.
Gaga Grump says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
We would be honored if you would join us.
The LOSOMBXE says reminder treasure box.
Now tap that screen, tap it.
Gaga Grump says hi there Mrs. Debs, how goes it?
Grump says welcome one and all.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go.
Gaga Grump says thanks for the
Now tap
reminder.
that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it.
Gaga Grump says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Level up.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grump says Blossom with the level up. Level 13 in the room.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grump says level
We
up
would be
song when this
honored
finishes.
if you would join us.
It's a LLL level.
Gaga Grump says time for
Guessed
this.
it wrong, you guessed it right. Now here we
Queen says hello.
are, another height. If support was letters, seriously, you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now. Green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snap. Level
Grump
up,
says a Trina
shout
where it is.
BL0SMVXE says at Trina, hey Trina.
Wordle solved and you help me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Trina says level up.
Trina says that Grump's hell on my cake, friend.
Gaga Grump says Trina in the house.
Trina says at BL0SSOM.VXE hey.
BL0SMVXE says at Trina, how are you?
Gaga Grump says thanks for doing your daily hearts, Rono and Trina.
Trina says at BL0SS.VXE good, thank you, and you.
The LOSOMBXE says at Miska.
Some VX, she says at Trina good.
We would be honored if you would join us. We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says who's ready to play Wordle.
Blow Zombie XD says no.
Trina says yes.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the roses, Saren.
Grumps says it stopped spamming,
BL Zombie XZ says I don't know here, just wait.
Mrs. Debs says yes. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily Heart Blossom and Mrs. Debs.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Below some VXC says that you'll be muted if you keep spamming.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Good game.
The Yellow Some DXE says it, Gaga and Grumps why?
BLO Zombie XD says that Grumps always Q.
Grumps says it G higher. Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ it serves me well.
BLO Zombie XD says it Grumps fares.
Trina says, is this music new or is it me?
The Yellow Some DXE says it, Trina no I think.
Gaga Grumps says this is not today's Wordle. We won't be trying however much you act and saying it is one of the quickest ways out of this room.
Grumps says it Trina what music? BL0SSOMVXZ says at Grumps, can you not hear it? Trina says at Grumps the background soothing style stuff. Welcome Lily Rosic Pink Heart to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says sorry guys I'm deaf, forgot about the music. Gaga Grumps says you want it off or down.
Trina says I've never heard it till now, haha.
BLO Zombie XD says add Gaga and Grumps down a bit.
Welcome Cameron MC Sweeney to Wordle with Gaga. Grumps says it enough with the sheep.
Tia says drink.
Gaga Grumps says steal. Say it again, Grumps will push your buttons.
Thanks for the follow!
Low Som VXZ says these new people.
Tia says drink.
Welcome King Wooders to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says is the better.
BLO Som VXZ says we're waiting for everyone to shut up.
Trina says everyone be patient, we will be doing the tap race shortly.
Grumps says it is not. We start with D and is not today's Wordle.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top. Like-a-thon, tap and don't stop. Like-a-thon, who will be crowned? Like-a-thon, gremlin renowned. Like-a-thon, fingers on fire. Like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG's G. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D, please, Trina.
Trina says dream, please.
Gaga Grumps says well they should be tapping it G. Gaga Grumps says dream you got. Gaga Grumps says yellow D and E in need of homes.
Trina says edify.
Gaga Grumps says I like edify, a very wordly word. Gaga Grumps says we start with ED, still homeless.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good
Gaga
game.
Grumps says ended still
Good
fits.
game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says we start with end. Gaga Grumps says endow is a good shout. Gaga Grumps says might be the only shout if I could be bothered to work it out, lol.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Trina says, are we missing the like bar today?
Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer.
Gaga Grumps says I have killed all the tick finty bells and whistles. We don't need the gameplay to see if it's prompting the line. Gaga Grumps says we are playing without this week to compare. Gaga Grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Trina says that Gaga and Grumps are okay. I've never been in this early, so didn't know. If it comes in later, sorry.
Gaga Grumps says no problemo. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says oh look, we are starting with A, D again.
I live at MAUSI says same.
Aliva MAUSI says Dame.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says it's the rail 1579 high.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG's Trina. Gaga Grumps says creative in the house, I didn't see you come in.
Trina says hi, creative.
Oh, creative one says hi.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D please creative.
Thanks for the follow.
Well, Creative One says drive.
Gaga Grumps says hi and I was starting with D and it's creative's word. Gaga Grumps says drive you got. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Coral. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking, there is a pinned post on my page explaining. Gaga Grumps says we end in VE.
Trina says Clove.
Gaga Grumps says no thanks KW, not that kind of room. Gaga Grumps says glove fits. Gaga Grumps says yes, green is right place. Yellow is in the word but wrong place. Grey not in the word. Gaga Grumps says we end over. LL Creative 1 says shove. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Fabian7 says shove.
Fabian7 says shove. Gaga Grumps says will the stove light the fireworks?
Fabian7 says shove.
Fabian7 says shove.
Gaga Grumps says it will not. Damn 50-50 WS.
Fabian7 says yay.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Sam. Gaga Grumps says we are playing Wordle later. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following that.
A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Fabian7 says alien.
Gaga Grumps says nearly Grumps. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. M. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the treasure box, Trina. Gaga Grumps says me too. Gaga Grumps says and hi Chris, I don't think I said it yet. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like a thon, gremlins don't tire like a thon, hearts be flying like a thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says you need to win or snipe the crown Sam. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with M please Trina. Trina says match please. Gaga Grumps says match you got. Trina says almost. Gaga Grumps says woe nearly. Gaga Grumps says yellow H in need of a home.
Grumps says ha, I had the wipeout locked and loaded.
Gaga Grumps says house fits.
Or creative one says hinge.
Gaga Grumps says lol. Gaga Grumps says we start with H. 8 letters wiped from the game.
Grumps says it ill creative one no E.
Trina says hilly.
Grumps says it SAM star no E.
Gaga Grumps says no E for hyped.
Oh creative one says now it doesn't fit.
Gaga Grumps says hilly fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Trina with the fireworks.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good game.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Crystal says good morning.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal on the nose. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. P. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Crystal says what are awesome entry.
Race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says yes, Crystal in the house.
Crystal says at Gamer Fairy for 120 times.
Grumps says at Crystal morning.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Gamer Fairy. Gaga Grumps says Crystal with the snipe.
Crystal says plant.
Grumps says at SM calm down.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with P please Crystal.
Crystal says plant.
Gaga Grumps says we have a format here SM. You have to win or snipe the first word. Gaga Grumps says plant you got. Gaga Grumps says N lives at number 4 and needs a home.
Grumps says another locked and loaded wipeout doesn't get to show itself, meh.
Trina says arena.
Gaga Grumps says all grumps.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says among.
Crystal says haunt.
Gaga Grumps says arena fits and tests all spots for the A.
Crystal says at Crystal and no T.
Gaga Grumps says we end Ina.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says hi.
Grumps says at SM behave, final reminder.
Trina says at Cabot, I'm sorry to hear that, I hope you're okay.
We would be honored.
Grumps says at
if
Gamer
you would
Fairy
join
420 higher.
Gaga Grumps says oh no cap huggles from this Gaga.
Owen says hyena.
Gaga Grumps says hyena is a good shout.
Gamer Fairy 420 says hi back, but I meant hi for hyena.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at Gamer Fairy 420.
It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Owen says gnome.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says Owen in the house. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E please Chris. Gaga Grumps says extra you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says Chris with the first wipeout.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says sound.
Owen says epic.
Owen says slick.
Gaga Grumps says sound fits.
Owen says clung.
Gaga Grumps says the UN moved into 3 and 4. Gaga Grumps says clung works.
Well, Creative One says clunk also. Owen says flung.
Gaga Grumps says we have a LUNG.
Well, Creative One says flung.
Gaga Grumps says flung it must be.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says wipe out to 4 with an all-green grid.
Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Grab your heartbeat, share us round.
Well, Creative One says BRB. Freezing on me.
It's your warm-up routine. Game gremlins on the scene. Game gremlins on the scene. Game gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Game gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Game gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Now tap that screen. Game gremlins on the scene.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Owen says Z.
Ding, 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 ding. That's right, nigga.
Gaga Grumps says Gamer Fairy on the nose. Gaga Grumps says Kian. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C. Gamer Fairy 420 says at Kian and Ella 2.
Ding, 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 ding. That's right, nigga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle is the name of the game.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin
We would be honored.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing the daily heart errand and all the roses. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says we have a new winner word starting with C, please key in. Gaga Grumps says good you got.
Join us.
Precious says hi everyone.
Gaga Grumps says yellow O in need of a home.
Trina says story.
Owen says trice.
Owen says trove asterisk asterisk asterisk.
Owen says trove.
Gaga Grumps says precious in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says story fits.
Grumps says at precious_higher.
Precious says at Grumps High.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless tea.
Trina says ingot.
Gaga Grumps says ingot works. Owen says bigot XXX. Gaga Grumps says and we added a homeless eye lol.
Owen says patio.
Gaga Grumps says patio is a good shout.
Good game.
Trina says on.
Gaga Grumps says gotta say I love the evolution of that grid.
Gaga is in the box. Don't let her lose.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours. Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly.
Good game.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game. Gremlins,
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Con.
Gremlins, let's go.
Good game.
Team Gaga,
Gaga Grumps says do the beat for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab the daily heart while I set up the next word.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG's stream.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Why? Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says I don't know if anyone saw that, but the lights just cut off my head lol. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Y please Chris. Gaga Grumps says you only got.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says this guy.
Gaga Grumps says Chris with the second wipeout too.
Oh no! Wipeout!
Trina says thumb.
Gaga Grumps says Trina. If peeps can't see your stickers, you need to update your TT app. Gaga Grumps says at least I assume creative meant Trina, not Tonya.
GamerFairy420 says I can see them.
Gaga Grumps says oh, then it might be you that needs to update then creative. Gaga Grumps says thumb fits.
Crystal says at LL Creative One I don't see them from Grump either.
Precious says plum.
Saint says plum.
Grump says if you cannot see the stickers, your TikTok app is likely in need of an update. They pushed one out.
Gaga Grumps says we end in UMB, come on wipeout to fireworks.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says all hail the power of the wipeout.
It's a performance and
Well Creative One says fireworks again.
Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Says it Gaga and Grumps D.
Well Creative One says funny says it's up to date on my end for TT.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Trina says at Will Creative One, maybe you need to do the heart me thing. Hover over our messages to reply in.
Trina says they may appear.
Well Creative One says I spy with my little eye.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with I please Sue.
Exan Bacon says, hey there, Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says hi there, user.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says eggs in the house. Gaga Grumps says and summer in the house.
Summer says hello.
Eggs and bacon says in tow.
Gaga Grumps says do you have a word starting with I for me Sue? Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered, try I'd like word.
Summer says guys stop spamming.
Exan Bacon says at Keegan no doubles at the start.
A creative one says infer.
Summer says Nikki stop spamming.
Grumps says at Summer higher.
Gaga Grumps says going with creatives infer.
Eggs and bacon says enter.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Says night.
Summer says nighty ditty. Gaga Grumps says I and then in need of homes.
Benjamin is in the house.
Summer says night.
Gamer Fairy 420 says sling.
Eggs and bacon says playing.
Gaga Grumps says Saint and Fatty in the house. Eggs and bacon says plain. Che says night. Gaga Grumps says plain fits.
Says night.
Summer says night.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says sting.
Kay says night.
Gaga Grumps says no change. 6 letters wiped from Gamph. Gaga Grumps says shy in the house with the heart me.
Well, creative one says night.
Eggs and bacon says Is it just me, or is the voice so delayed?
Gaga grumps says night works.
Summer says at Exanbacon BC everyone spamming chat.
Gaga grumps says it's delayed. Trina says at eggs and bacon yes because of spamming.
Creative One says, where's the mods?
Gaga grumps says we added a homeless G.
Gamer Fairy 420 says dying.
Says doing.
Trina says going.
Gaga grumps says he wasn't paying attention. Gaga grumps says going works. Gaga grumps says at least the ing works.
Says dying.
Gamer Fairy 420 says swing.
Eggs and bacon says swing.
Trina says filler.
Crystal says swing. Icing.
Gaga grumps says we're down to fifth guess. How many options are there?
Summer says at Crystal can't be icing me, I can't go first. Trina says suing icing dying swing.
Trina says vying.
Grumps says it no th.
Gamer Fairy 420 says vying. Gaga grumps says so if we do sword we should be good.
Crystal says at Summer Ye you are correct, sorry coffee not picked in.
Summer says at Crystal it's okay.
Grumps says I doubt Wordle would use dying. That's too morbid for them.
Exanbacon says sword works as a filler.
Gaga grumps says S will tell us if it's swing or using. D will tell us if dying.
Summer says at Alicia Noel.
Says lol.
Says lying.
Trina says vying then.
Gamer Fairy 420 says vying.
Gaga grumps says okay what did we muss?
Chase says fling.
Eggs and bacon says wipe out. Chase says oh no L.
Says no L.
Gaga grumps says can't be lying. Gaga Grumps says must be vying.
Good game.
Grumps says vying it must be.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says still awesome use of a filter.
Good game.
A Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate. Play a part, it's a live date. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with
Exon Backen says, have we had any fireworks today yet?
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says we have had 2 wipeouts and 2 fireworks. One of them wipeouts are fireworks.
Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says yep, they like the quick win-loss and don't care for the craft of winning Wordle lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Ill Creative 1 mostly the throw
Gaga
stuff at the wall and
Grumps says
see
hi
what
there
sticks
you.
crowd, not how we play. Grumps says at you higher. Welcome Sue Wyatt to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. L. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
says that Rip Looking Techno better win the race then.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with L please Trina.
Trina says light please.
Gaga Grumps says light you got.
Grump says at Major Paddyman's it's Trina to start.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Happy Lad.
Trina says at LL Creative 119 at the start Papa.
Gaga Grumps says Whitehouse in the chat. Gamer Fairy 420 says space.
Trina says Baker.
Says Boom.
Gaga Grumps says space fits.
Trina says nearly.
Gaga Grumps says thought it was a double then.
Gamer Fairy 420 says saved by the few.
Gaga Grumps says we have an E in need of a home.
Says Rower.
Gaga Grumps says let's test.
Says Rower.
Trina says Boxer.
Gamer Fairy 420 says Boxer.
Gaga Grumps says we have an trap. What are the options to filter?
Crystal says FBM.
Trina says rowdy filler.
Grump says I do like Boxer.
Gaga Grumps says I like Rowdy better than Boxer. We may end up needing a second filter.
Grumps says at Turo Queepan plenty of other options, calm down.
Says Bora.
Says, but that's a weird word.
Saint says can't be boxer. Gamer Fairy 420 says buxom.
Gamer Ferry for Turo says for filler.
Crystal says Bonix.
Gaga Grumps says have mover and boxer.
Says the third letter is R.
Gaga Grumps says why can't it be boxer?
Gamer Fairy for Turo says at Turo Kaipen don't be rude.
Crystal says that was supposed to be her.
Gaga Grumps says why is third letter R? Gaga Grumps says we aren't waiting, we're working it out before guessing.
Trina says buxom is a good filler.
Grumps says at KXenzo behave.
Gaga Grumps says patience grasshopper. Gaga Grumps says boxer it is.
Trina says at Gamer Fairy for Turo nice choice.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat, really good use of filters.
Welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome in guys, settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins
Gaga
on the
Grumps
scene.
says I forgot to spin it lol.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Chase says Grumps did say he liked boxer.
Now tap that screen. Tap it.
Gaga Grumps says thank you, Fatty.
Game Gremlins come and let's go.
Trina says for Gamer Fairy Feather.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those teams stick.
Gaga Grumps says he did, but we didn't know it then.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says nobody is forced to be
Now
here.
tap that screen.
If you dislike how we play, you are free to visit other runs.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says hi there Lily.
Grumps says at Lily Henderson hi.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Trina says at Grumps, yeah Grumps, you tell them.
Trina says get those boxing gloves out to help you, haha.
Gaga Grumps says if we lose at Wordle is because you made a mistake. Every game is winnable if you play properly.
Grumps says at Trina it'll just sit on them.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Trina says at Grumps he'll feed them my cake, make them sweet for 5 minutes. Grumps says at Ill Creative One I was wondering when you became an MC.
Gaga Grumps says he nearly got it again.
Gamer Fairy Photo says at Che.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C. Che says OMG in magical. Gaga Grumps says shy on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top, like a thorn. Tap and don't stop, like a thorn. Who will be crowned?
Gaga Grumps says might help if I start the song roll. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says I see someone tap themselves out of the room again, welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the follow Nelly. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please shy.
Chase says at Foddy.
Chase says CRAFT for a wipeout, please, mama.
Gaga Grumps says craft you got.
Crystal says C is 4.
Gaga Grumps says wipeout denied.
Chase says it.
Milargaming says afternoon.
Grumps says at Millar Gaming higher.
Gamer Fairy 420 says prime. Gaga Grumps says yay I got a Cooper wiggle butt. Thanks Crystal.
Trina says drink.
Milargaming says drove.
Gaga Grumps says shy. Remind me I need a corgi wiggle butt song later please.
Chase says, I am indeed the baby Gaga.
Jay says corgi wiggle noted.
Gaga Grumps says yes we are the real Gaga and Grumps to Shy's kids lol. Gaga Grumps says prime fits.
Trina says wrong.
Gaga Grumps says no change 8 letters out of the game.
Che says Prime said no I don't fit.
Gaga Grumps says wrong works.
Crystal says have a blessed day, have to go to work.
Gaga Grumps says we have a RO.
Precious says brood.
Gaga Grumps says you too Crystal, thanks for coming.
Miller Gaming says brood.
Grumps says it Crystal, good day to you.
Gaga Grumps says drool is a shout.
Crystal says it grumps you to sir.
Gaga Grumps says all green grid.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that
Gaga
screen, yeah,
Grumps says yay awesome tapping Gremlins.
come and let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Game Gremlins on the scene. Now tap
Gaga
that
Grumps
screen.
says trade the box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Robux.
Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Shay says, I've just been given a big spoon with dessert. I think I might cry.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying, like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says doesn't he know yet you can't use big spoon roll. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says that Harvey Wilton win the race to call first word. Jay says H is trying to say I used a big spoon with my ice cream the other day when I absolutely did not.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S please Chris. Gaga Grumps says sure you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says Chris 3 for 3 roll.
Oh no.
Chases stole my wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says Chris is the new wipeout ruler.
Jay says at Chris Marvin you've inherited my curse. I apologize.
Gaga Grumps says no R for bring. Gaga Grumps says blank fits.
Grumps says at Harry main account no HO.
Gaga Grumps says yellow N and K in need of homes. Gaga Grumps says can't be knack.
Grumps says at Archie Dodson no K in last.
Gaga Grumps says can't be wonky.
Grumps says at Archie Dodson no.
Gaga Grumps says Pinky works.
Trina says funky.
Gaga Grumps says we end in NKY.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says funky.
Milogaming says funky.
Gaga Grumps says hold on. Trap check. Gaga Grumps says funky, gunky, junky. Now would dunky be valid? Gaga Grumps says not pressing enter until trap check.
Milogaming says fudge to get rid of 2 letters.
Gaga Grumps says good option Miller. Braze Gifter Axe says do fudge.
Milogaming says funky.
Trina says nice filler.
Gaga Grumps says funky it is.
Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grunts, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grunts, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's
Gaga Grumps says and I didn't see it, but Miller in the house.
Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grunts, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grunts, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says diggity to Gaga. Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one.
Milogaming says at Gaga and Grumps hey, early finish at work for me today.
Gaga Grumps says and nice for us to get to see you. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Chase says, I mean I.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I.
Grumps says Q. We need a Q.
Gaga Grumps says yeah yeah shy. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says that Tay win the race to call first word.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with I please Miller.
Milargaming says index, please.
Gaga Grumps says index you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
Milargaming says rebound.
Oh no.
Gamer Fairy Fortuo says roast.
Trina says patch.
Milargaming says about.
Gaga Grumps says roast fits. Gaga Grumps says lol nice Chris.
Grumps says at Chris Marvin you'll get more chances.
Milargaming says toast.
Gaga Grumps says wow nearly wipeout to 2.
A creative one says toast.
A creative one says coast.
A creative one says boast.
Milargaming says tubes to secure the letter.
Eggs and bacon says it's toast.
Gaga Grumps says okay. 3 options, 4 guesses, no filter needed.
A creative one says we can try them all.
Gaga Grumps says not on a 3 miller. Miss fireworks if filtering on 3. Gaga Grumps says let's try the double first. Gaga Grumps says and Ronf.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the box!
Gaga Grumps says amazing.
Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says let's fit in one last grid.
Trina says all green sticker to be incoming.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Or Creative One says keep them on.
Gaga Grumps says yep, I think an all green might be better than a spin the wheel.
Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says let's play the last game. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. U. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Trina says precious to choose.
A Creative One says, I give up likes, don't like me today.
Gaga grumps, says Trina with the snipe crown.
Precious says at Trina www tie.
Precious says unite, please.
Trina says at Precious _
Gaga grumps, says where my snipe sound FX. Gaga grumps, says unite, you got Precious.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga grumps, says whiteouts in the chat.
Can figure it out.
Precious says, oh dear.
Oh no. Wipeout.
The creative one says fourth one today. Right.
Grumps says it Trina.
Milargaming says ouch to wipeouts in a row.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it
Gaga
wrong.
grumps, says and Trina with the level up to number 13 in the room.
Another height. If support was letters, there's a youth spell.
Milargaming says Porky.
This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green.
Precious says Major.
Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in. Guess it snapped. Level unlocked. Shout out chat.
Creative one says blame.
Level streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped.
Trina says at Milargaming, sorry for sniping you'll follow to apologize. Had to give Precious a chance too.
Milargaming says at Trina, it's all good smiley face.
Gaga grumps, says board fits.
Trina says at Milargaming thank you.
Gaga grumps, says yellow O in need of a home. Gaga grumps, says hi so-so. No plurals in Wordle.
Trina says shock.
Precious says showy.
Gaga grumps, says shockworks.
Milargaming says clock.
Trina says scoop.
Precious says scoop.
Milargaming said scoop.
Gaga grumps, says S lives at number 1 and O at 3. C is homeless.
LL Creative One says scoop.
Gaga grumps, says can't be scold. Gaga grumps, says scoop is a shout. Precious says SCO FF.
Trina says scoff scowl.
Malargaming says scoff.
The creative one says scoff.
Gaga Grumps says a scoff and scowl are only options. Precious says yes.
Gamer Fairy for 120 says just 2.
Gaga Grumps says 2 options, 2 guesses, no filter needed.
Malargaming says can't be score, there's no E or R.
Gaga Grumps says scoff is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says as ever.
Blossom VXZ says hello.
Trina says always the last option, haha.
Bullsom VXZ says skull.
Malargaming says at no E or R.
Gaga Grumps says it can't be score. Precious says has to be the other Wordle, we don't like you.
Blossom VXZ says skull.
Gametheory Fortua says makes it more exciting.
Gaga Grumps says oh great Blossom, give us another option now when we don't have a filter lol.
Well, Creative One says is still a word.
Malargaming says scowl.
Malargaming says yay.
Precious says woohoo.
Gaga Grumps says woot.
Blossom VXD says bye.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Well, Creative One says only 20 yellows.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Malargaming says have a great evening.
Precious says bye everyone, thanks for the games.
Trina says thank you for the live as always. Take care all.
Gamer Fairy 420 says thank you for the game.
Well, Creative One says look at those O's in the middle.
LL Creative One says bye Precious Dream.